Hi, Edwin. So good to see you.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on today. For folks who don't know, Edwin and I met a couple of years ago. You were working at Datadog at the time, and then we ended up being on a panel together, which was really fun. And for people who are in New York City, you might remember this panel podcast episode, but it's not really out there. So you had to be there to know, which is really fun. And I think that must have been in around like 2023, 2022, something like that. New York was really hungry for design community, and it was the first of many droplets of the community that we were seeking at the time. Thanks for being a part of that. Basically, after that, I was like, okay, this person's really cool and has been at Datadog for a hot minute. And so then when I started working on this book, I, of course, had to be like, hey, Edwin, what's up? Let's talk. Let's nerd out. So, for the people who are watching or listening, Edwin, can you share who are you? What are you working on right now? And yeah, how have things evolved for you since we last talked?
Oh my gosh, I could talk for a long time off of that. Thanks for having me, by the way. I'm really happy to be here. That panel was really fun. I have good memories from that panel. And I even had friends from college who came into the audience for that,
So
which was
sweet.
really nice. Yeah. Yes, that was something like 2023. I That marked, I think, the middle of my time at Datadog. So I had been there for a couple years since 2020, and now I'm at a company called Jane Street, and I'm like 10 days away from having been there for 1 year.
Congrats.
So I capped my Datadog journey at almost exactly 5 years. And I have nothing but good things to say about Datadog. I loved being there.
They're cool people, yeah.
So what has happened since 2023? So many things about the industry have changed in that time. I had one really big project in the last year at Datadog that I was really proud of. I'm excited to talk a little bit about that. And now my life is a little bit different. The company I'm at is a very different shape. And the way I'm working is a really different shape than it was before. And even since I left, Datadog has grown up more and more. And the design organization there, I think, is like 150 plus people.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's huge.
So I'm looking at the book and I quoted you in chapter 4, I remember, about working on this like exciting new concept and you're collaborating with some engineers at the company on it. And then one particular engineer completely tore apart
Oh, yeah.
your work and you went and you met with her and got really great feedback from her and ended up transforming her into an advocate. How did you internalize that as a gift rather than a threat? And what advice do you have to other people who are receiving feedback like that?
This is a great question. Okay, so this is finally a project I can talk about. I think at the time
Yay!
I wasn't able to because it wasn't launched, but this is the project I just mentioned
Awesome.
that it launched my last week.
Wow.
It was the week of Dash, which is Datadog's big yearly conference, and then it was up on the stage, and it felt like such a capstone, like I was graduating college or
Oh
something.
my gosh.
But yeah, that project, I spent like a year working on that, and it was a project I had pitched. So I had been a staff designer for a while, and I think I had been responsible for this vertical that we call incident response. It contains many products, but primarily it's monitoring so that you can detect incidents, and then it's using the incidents tool to coordinate with teammates while you work on it. There's a lot of products in the space like point solutions, but Datadog's whole strategy around these things is if people are using Datadog in conjunction with another tool, see if we can incorporate the good parts of that tool into Datadog so they can just stay on one surface. For an
Smart.
incident, this is really valuable as well because you don't need to switch around so much. And when you go into a big vertical like that, there's always a lot of ongoing projects, but part of my job was to try to identify a way to bring all of the workflows people are doing across the products in that space together and them. And this project was my pitch to accomplish that.
Hmm.
It was thinking about the end-to-end workflow of going through an incident where you might be using a dashboard or a service page in Datadog, as well as the incident product, as well as Slack and a bunch of other surfaces. And my pitch was like, let's turn all of Datadog into incident mode while you're working on an incident so that while you're looking at that dashboard, you can see what's happening in Slack. When someone sends a link in Slack, you can see that graph rendered in a sidebar if it was a link to a Datadog graph. Often it was, which is funny. So you're in Slack, but you're sending links to Datadog back and forth. And then you're in Datadog, and it's like Datadog didn't even know about it, but it could have because we were already ingesting the Slacks.
Right.
So that was like my big idea. It did end up shipping, and I think it was pretty cool as well. The workflow that I was pitching was if somebody sets an incident off and you're like attached to that incident, either automatically or manually tagged, it sends a big notification in the bottom left corner, and then you can opt into this incident mode where it opens this sidebar and it scopes all of Datadog for you. And I think where we settled was pretty useful, but the first version, this engineer was right. The first version was not as useful. The way the engineers triaged these incidents was primarily in Slack. My proposal was mostly that we notify you when an incident was declared, and we show truncated previews of Slack messages, but only the messages where people were linking to Datadog graphs. Because the idea was if they're sharing Datadog stuff in Slack, we should just make it easy for you to click on those things and navigate around Datadog
Yeah.
by clicking on those things. It had a novelty factor, and conceptually it was interesting, but some of the framing was like, this is useless or something. But I had been pitching this to various PMs in the vertical, as well as people in design and executives and stuff. And when you're pitching something, getting any kind of engagement is probably just a good thing.
That's a
I,
good
I
way of
think
thinking
like,
about it.
yeah, the fact that somebody really thought about my proposal and then had a negative reaction, that's better than somebody saying, yeah, that seems cool, and not actually caring or wanting to help you. I think that it also was a little validating in that this person thought this was just coming. To me, it was this fragile idea that didn't actually exist and I might not get buy-in on. But to this person, it was like, we're going to do this. And I think this is a bad idea. And I think this would be a better version of that. So we were able to meet. And like I said, they ended up being totally right about their feedback. That allowed me to change the idea to be actually useful. And I feel like that iteration of the idea landed a lot better than the thing that I had just solo been shaping and pitching. So that was a really valuable feedback session in the end.
It sounds like because the person had actually engaged with your idea and considered what the cons were and came back with a version that was improved or what they thought would be a better iteration, it meant that they were taking the time to actually sit with your idea versus just acknowledging it and waving it away.
I think it might have also been useful that this person did not have the context of the project. I had talked to lots of people who worked on incidents and lots of PMs. And when you're in idea space with people and working on mockups, they're filling in blanks for you while they're thinking about it because they have their idea of what would be cool. I have my idea of what would be cool. We're talking about it, and so we have some consensus about what would be cool. And then what gets put down in the mockup might not actually encompass all of those ideas. And if someone just sees the mockup, then the idea is subjected to a much higher level of scrutiny because they're not in the mix of the sort of unwritten things that you've been talking about. And I think that feedback session might have been the first time, because it was such a early idea, that somebody out of the loop had a look at it.
Yeah.
Maybe a good strategy then is to test your ideas against people who aren't in the loop earlier and more often. But I got lucky in that it happened at a really fortuitous point in the project life cycle.
That makes a lot of sense. And the more that you're communicating, the more people can actually show up and give feedback. So even though maybe it could have happened, quote unquote, earlier, at the same time, it happened when it needed to because you were doing the work of socializing it. And I know you also mentioned that this was a project that you were pitching to folks. How much, when you were pitching this, were you including potential metrics and things like that? And I ask this because in the staff designer course, I get a lot of questions about how to go about building a case for a new project. And so I'm curious what your approach tends to be, especially around how you translate the pitch to people who aren't designers?
Feel like I have a bad answer to this, which
That's
is
okay.
none. There were no no numbers to support this, which made it a very risky proposal, or at least at risk of not happening. I am not against getting numbers to support an idea. This is usually a pretty good idea. You define the problem by using numbers to back up the problem. There's a flip side of that, though, where I've seen many pitches backed up by numbers that still weren't convincing, or pitches backed up by numbers that were poorly queried and maybe just wrong. Or having worked on dashboards for a long time at Datadog, I know how easy it is to make a query of your data that misleads you, where you forget to omit synthetic tests that
Yep.
are duplicating all of your events or something, or there are weird outliers like a day that you had an outage that mess up all your averages or something like that. So numbers aren't always a slam dunk. It is not true that you can just build a slam dunk problem statement with numbers. The way that I had done it is the year prior to this project being released and announced at Dash 2024, we presented this workflow where I could triage an incident from my phone on Slack, but we never showed how the handoff would work once you opened your laptop and actually went to Datadog. And you're eventually going to do that at any point when you're managing an incident. If it's a real incident, you're going to open your laptop, you're going to go to Datadog. And the problem statement seemed really clear to me, which is we just told all of our customers about this anticipated future of triaging incidents. And we stopped talking at exactly the point where you actually open Datadog. And that doesn't make any sense because when you open Datadog, it's just like, what's up? Here's the dashboard. Here's your
Hi.
homepage. And like, yeah,
Hello,
you've got an
friend.
incident. It's like there's an incident on and you're the responder on the incident, but you have to go to that product page to see that that's happening. And if it's like 3 a.m., it'd be really nice if you just went to any page in Datadog and it was like, seems like you're probably responding to an incident right now. Let's make it a little bit easier for you to figure out where you're going because you're probably stressed out.
Absolutely.
And that just seemed like a really clear problem statement to me. I think everyone agreed that was a problem. It was refining the solution to that problem that I spent almost all of my time on. So I didn't really have to fight for the problem statement. I had to make a convincing proposal for something feasible and cool that we could do.
You essentially pointed out a missing portion of the vision that the company had communicated, which already means it's a business priority.
Yeah,
You share, hey, there's some content missing from the logic, and we need to think about this. So I'm going to spend some time thinking about that if we want to sell this as something big, which it seems like we do because we just put it in the biggest thing that we do every year.
exactly.
And if you focus on a company priority, it's a lot easier to get people to buy in to your work. So that's a really good point. And it makes sense that as a designer, that's solving a major business problem. So there'd be a lot of immediate buy-in. Sounds like that's really helpful, or that was really helpful for that moment at the company. And congratulations that it's live now. Obviously, since that point, you have transitioned over to working at Jane Street. It sounds like at Datadog, you had a lot of strong relationships that you spent a lot of time building up, social capital, which could contribute to easier attempts at getting buy in, along with the work that you were doing of just noticing what mattered and following through on that. But now you're at a new company. So, what advice would you have for people who are going from a place where they have a lot of social capital to a place where they don't and they have to build it?
This will be a sample size of one from me because before Datadog, I worked at smaller companies where you didn't really have to build social capital. You were just expected to do your job and figure out how to be useful. In a lot of ways, Jane Street is similar to startups. You have a lot of autonomy, where at Datadog, only very senior people like staff level people were expected to figure out how to be useful and make your own projects. Here, most people are expected to just figure out how to be useful. I really like this because I have a lot of ideas. I imagine this is true anywhere you go where there are enough people that not everybody knows everybody else. I have been leaning on the example I lived through at Datadog, which was that I spent 2 years just working on one product. I think feels crazy to say out loud, but I'm pretty sure that's right. I just worked on dashboards. And by the time I was finished with dashboards, I had shipped some really big projects. I was really fortunate that dashboards is what I was assigned to when I started because that's the biggest page on Datadog that's got the most views. And I built a reputation by shipping an entirely new version of dashboards, building a bunch of our example dashboards that ship to customers when they install an integration for Redis or something, and then shipping a bunch of medium-sized improvements to dashboards. And I also became very expert in how dashboards worked, probably mostly because I had to build so many of them myself and dog food the tool so much. And I think that reputation is what I rode on for the rest of the 5 years because people kept, they would still bring it up 3 years after I had been working on other stuff. It gave me some automatic level of trust that I could just figure out how to be useful and that I should have some level of autonomy. The way to apply that lesson, something that I've been doing here, is just trying to focus on long-term projects and ship stuff that is noticeably better and definitely good and useful. I'm not coming in and saying, oh, I know a lot about making websites and I think we should redesign everything. I don't think anyone would appreciate someone doing that. You got to learn the ropes. There's so much to learn at any new company. I switched sectors even from like SaaS to finance. So there's like a million new things to learn. And I think it's just important to build credibility by learning, being a person who asks lots of questions and is inquisitive, and like shipping stuff that people use.
People will come up to you and say, "Oh, you're the person who did this thing," or they've heard that you've worked on these bigger impact
Yeah.
pieces of work.
I talk to a lot of people here for all the tools I work on. All the tools that we build at Jane Street are internal tools, basically. And most of the users are here in this office. We have other offices and there are users there too, but most people are in the New York office. So for the first 3 or 4 months that I was here, I would look at people who used the things I was working on most the prior week. And then I would just go visit their desk and watch them use the tool and take feedback on how it was going. I met a lot of people that way. If you care more about customers, you can build customer relationships in a similar way. I honestly think that's a lot harder because there's other factors in play in that relationship. They might be upset about their bill or something, and that's not a problem you can help to solve with UX so much. So it's not just building a reputation by shipping stuff and a person knowing about the tool, but it's building a reputation as someone who's like getting around and being receptive to feedback.
Yeah, yeah, trying to make sure that you're in touch with whoever your stakeholders are or the people that you're designing for, especially if they're internal. I love the idea of just going up to them. And that reminds me of one of my first roles with the title UX designer, where I was working on a content management system that was mostly just used by internal folks at the company. And so I was able to just go over to them and ask them, how are you using this thing? If you could change anything, like what would you change to make it better and things like that, and jam with them. I love having access to whoever the customers are. It's great when it's internal because then, like you said, you start to build a reputation over time. In general, love the idea of show up, ask questions, listen, learn, figure out where you can make the most impact early, and then ride that as long as you can until the
Yeah.
next project.
It
I
lasts a long time, becomes
It
myth.
does. I am curious how you keep people going and focused on that longer term vision when you're working on a project for, say, 2 years. Because I don't know about you, but I've worked at companies where every 3 to 6 months there's a reorg, people focus on new priorities, and it can be hard to actually finish the swing. How do you keep people focused on what really matters?
You really have to do a job that is not product design in order to accomplish this. I would guess that like less than 5% of my contribution to shipping this feature at Datadog was designing the feature. I designed the feature so quickly. I iterated on it a little bit, and then I spent like 8 months being a PM, basically, and being a salesman internally for the idea. That was hard. I really didn't find that part super enjoyable, but the payoff was awesome. The way I started the idea, I did like circles of consensus on an increasing level of fidelity. I wrote this sequence of docs before Google Docs had tabs. They were all interlinked with a special header. And
Wow.
the first one was mostly about the problem statement, and then had a very hand wavy, very lo-fi mock-up of the solution that fits into that gap. And I talked to many people about this. I think that was the most read doc still by the time it shipped because it really got around. And I was just trying to build support. I was also looking for engineers to help me because I couldn't make stuff. Now that has changed a little bit because you can prototype things to make a pitch. But I just had my Figmas and my videos. Then I made another doc that went into greater fidelity on the actual solution. This was the one that I got feedback on from that engineer that you
I
mentioned
see.
earlier, because you could see the proposal. And then I made a third doc after I'd incorporated that feedback. And it basically is what shipped, but 8+ months later. So I was kind of done at that point. We knew what the goal was. I made my own North Star. And then it was a matter of wrangling what Datadog called at the time, at least, a squad together, which is a team that's not quite a team and they're working on your project, but you're not a PM or a manager. People talk about what is it called? Leading without authority or something.
Influence without authority.
Yeah, and it's the embodiment of that expression because it's literally like you are leading a weekly meeting and engineering stuff without being these people's boss. And so at any time you could lose them. But I managed to get a group going where there were two or three other sort of true believers. We had one person who was full-time on the project on front end, which
Oh,
I
wow.
think is one of the more important parts. And then we had to get engineering representatives from like 5 different teams because the whole point of this project was to unify a bunch of different products into this one interface. Almost like the hardest version of this idea of pitching your own thing because it was cross team. Doing a cross team pitch from scratch, very hard.
Respect to you because just any piece of that by itself is really challenging. But then keeping all of those people coordinated when they could, as you said, go off and go back to their team and just focus on team needs is
Yeah.
really challenging. And yeah, balancing. I imagine you were probably doing other work at this point, and everybody except that one person who was 100% was probably balancing other projects at the same
100
time.
is probably
Yeah.
wrong. It's probably like 80%. I think the
Oh, wow.
most I
Yeah.
ever had was 50%. And there were a lot of points during the project when other people attempted to make me stop working on it.
Wow.
Like they would rather I work on their thing, or they thought some part of it was most important and we should drop the rest and just work on this part. So I really had to stick to my vision at a couple points and put my neck on the line and say, I think this is more important than that, or I really want to keep working on this. And there's a risk when you're in a position at a company that you can make your own work. You're also in a position to be responsible for that work being successful. And if you double down on it, it just gets riskier because if you insisted you spend 50 to 80% of your time on some project for a year, and then at the end of the year it never shipped or it fell apart or whatever, that's pretty bad.
Doesn't look very good. That's the social capital piece there, right?
I spent it,
Gambling.
yeah.
You were spending your capital, a lot of it, but then it
I,
paid off.
it did. Another aspect that is interesting is after the design was finished and I was kind of emceeing the project, I wasn't doing that much outside of the weekly meeting. I was kind of hurting people. And another thing that I tried to do was be really communicative. I had a big Slack channel with like 200 people in it, and I would post updates and I would try to keep people focused on the end goal and how close we are to the end goal so that it was easier to track and not just get lost in the details of being only 25% of the way through a project. And I would also make a lot of demos. So I'd record myself using the in progress thing. I did a lot of exec updates because they were interested in this. And then as we got closer to the project being finished, it got pulled into the next year's dash. And then there was more pressure to really finish something because we had a rule that it had to work for us to be able to show it at Dash so that we're not showing vaporware, keeping people on task and sharing updates and continually pitching this thing became my full-time job, basically. That
Wow.
was my role in the project. And I don't know if you'd asked me at the beginning if that would sound weird to me if you told me, did you know that you're going to spend 80% of this project being a cheerleader for the project?
Literally being a PM. Yeah.
I don't know if I would have believed it, and I don't think I would have been super excited about it, but it didn't bother me that much because it was exciting to see progress happen. This idea that I came up with, it felt really cool.
I love the idea that you could continuously feel that you were getting closer to something.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of designers, they're really hungry to ship because you get the immediate dopamine of, wow, the work that I came up with is out there. But these larger projects, it's a long game and you have to be mentally prepared and ready to keep going as long as it takes, especially in this case where you came up with the idea, to have that conviction and to continuously remind yourself that you're working towards something bigger and better is really wonderful. I do want to pivot. So you alluded to this, that one of the aspects that was maybe a little bit more primitive at the time in terms of how you were working was that you could make some mock-ups, for example. Nowadays, things might be a bit easier in terms of how you might be able to prototype something that's a bit more full-fledged. I'm curious how you've been using AI these days, what you're thinking about the staff designer role with how AI has been reshaping our work world. What are your thoughts on that?
Great questions. You know what's funny is I tried in this project that I've been describing to use it a couple times to help me outline a doc or mock up some ideas to help me brainstorm. It was terrible for those things. And I was just like, yeah, it doesn't take me that long to write a doc, and I could write one a lot better than this. Plus, in those moments, I think I was feeling stuck. And it didn't help me get unstuck. I don't think it's still super good at helping you to get unstuck. What it's good at is helping you execute on a clear idea. And the fastest way I could do that in 2024, 25 was by using Figma to make prototypes and then recording a demo video. I was pretty fast at that. Now, the fastest way for me to communicate an idea is to make a static prototype in code. I feel like a lot of people are discovering this, and I'm still figuring out what this means and how to use this ability. I wrote a blog post on the Jane Street blog about how I've been doing this, and I think something a lot of people are stressing about in AI output in general, whether it's a website or an essay, is now other people have to sift through your AI slop. My article is like a contemplation on this workflow because I feel really productive in being able to execute my vision quickly and at a much greater level of fidelity than I ever was able to do in Figma. And also in a way that is just about my workflow. It helps me to come up with more ideas because I keep seeing a prototype and then I use it and I'm like, ooh, I want to change this now. And then I just go through like a million cycles of iteration. But then on the flip side of this process, eventually you have to talk to other people about your idea. And maybe having the most detailed thing ever that you spend a week toiling over is not the right level of thing to be sharing with other people for collaboration. This is a very valid point of view, and it's what I go back and forth on in the posts and in real life. If I were doing this project at Datadog today and I had the tools that I have now, I do think that it would have looked different. It's also really different at every company, the way that people prefer to communicate, the way that power structures work, and how to get buy-in on stuff. I think I still probably would have written some docs, but instead of a video of me using a Figma prototype, I probably would have made some kind of interactive website type thing. But ultimately, it's just about being able to communicate an idea. How do you make the thing in your head legible very quickly to other people? And if you have something where the AI went into great detail and you didn't think about those details, and then you just hand someone a URL and it's not clear what they're supposed to do, this is not good communication, right? Maybe because the tool is more powerful, it's even easier and to a greater degree to communicate poorly and make a bad prototype. Whereas if you have a video, it just is what it is. But it's also possible to make something really great, like in a much shorter amount of time.
I've definitely seen over the past 6 months a large number of really shiny prototypes that don't fully communicate the idea by themselves. You still got to write a doc, you still need to present it, have some kind of framing, something to actually get buy-in. And I've definitely seen how sometimes the prototyping work can absorb the energy that could be maybe spent actually figuring out, are we solving the right problem with this idea? And really validating the idea itself in terms of how valuable or useful is this particular expression of the idea or the solution at all, or are we even solving the right problems? Things of that nature. Where I'm at, and I've talked to a number of people about this, is similar to you. It's great for certain things, and then it's not something I would use in certain situations. But thank you for sharing. And yeah, definitely going to link to your thoughts on that. We are pretty close to time, so I do want to ask what is keeping you in design right now, because I know that you have a storied career.
As opposed to retiring.
Yeah, or trying something else, going to run a coffee shop. I talked to a lot of designers who are like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to become a yoga teacher or something else, sabbatical.
I've been making websites since I was in like ninth grade. I just love making websites. I'm not sure how many people feel this way, but I really am a true believer in websites are cool. In high school, I made internal tools for teachers to check out laptop carts because there weren't enough laptops for every student. And so you had to reserve a cart for 30 minutes at a time to bring it into your classroom to do some kind of computer-based thing. I synthesized a tool for people out of text files. And honestly, that wow factor is still there for me. And making internal tools brings that forward so much more because you can sit down with someone who's using a thing you made, get feedback, fix it same day, and then send it to them. And they're like, thank you so much. This is going to make my life so much easier. That is so cool for me. So I don't even feel close to being burnt out or anything. I feel more energized than ever that I can just synthesize tools out of text files for people that really work.
That's so wholesome. And I always ask this question because I'm hoping to give people some joy and energy and generally hope, or at least to remind them to have the conversation of why am I here? Why am I doing this? With the younger version of themselves that made that choice in the first place. And I love that your origin story is that you were just a kid who was trying to be helpful, and there's still value in that kind of work for you. Obviously, capitalism, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to love our work and all that stuff. But I do think that in a moment like this, where the work of design is shifting, there is some value in knowing, why did I do this in the first place? And is there any energy that I can get from this?
If I retired, I think I would still be making websites like
Same,
for fun.
TBH.
And it's so much easier at a company. You have an automatic audience.
Yeah, it's just convenient that we do this work. I got started also at a young age, and I found out that you could get paid for this, and it's been awesome. So I'm grateful that people pay me to do stuff that I would just probably do some variant of in my spare time. Well, thank you so much, Edwin. Where can people find you on the internet?
Honestly, I'm not that online anymore. Like LinkedIn, my website is ehmorris.com. I've got blog posts on the Jane Street blog, but I'm not really posting anywhere anymore.
Social media sometimes feels like a scam anyway. But with that, thank you to everyone who's been listening. Okay,
Thanks so
cheers.
much, Kat. This is great.